Hi, English 112. I want to spend just a few minutes doing a little overview of writing good literary analysis. It's something that not everyone has done. Um, Many folks up to this point have written like summaries of literature or their own personal interpretation of it. It's not quite what we're going to be doing. So if you remember that this entire semester has been about argument, all kinds of different arguments. You started with a personal statement, which was an argument about yourself. You are now making an argument about a piece of literature. So how do you go about doing that? Well, I want to reference a page in your text, How to Write Anything. So the main textbook. If you look on page 171, there are several key ideas in orange, the subheadings, that you want to pay attention to as you're thinking about putting together a literary analysis essay. So the first one is begin with a close reading. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a second, but you want to read carefully because you know eventually you're going to be writing about this piece and making some sort of argument about it. So you want to pay attention to the details and see which details might fit in your essay to help prove your argument. The next one is make a claim or an observation. That's your thesis. So your thesis statement for a literary analysis is making a point about the literature that you need to prove is true. You're not summarizing it. You're not going act by act and explaining anything about the play. You're arguing about it. So here's an example of an argument about Hamlet. It's a bad example because I don't think it's true. But if I were to write the thesis that says something like, in William Shakespeare's play Hamlet, the lead character, Hamlet, is a spoiled brat. Okay, that's a statement that I would then need to back up and prove is true. Using the play itself and using other research, can I prove that Hamlet is indeed a spoiled brat? Some things I might need to do, I need to define what a spoiled brat is. Because if I'm going to prove that he is one, I need to know what that is. Then I need to use the play itself to say, see, here, he's a spoiled brat. Here, he's a spoiled brat. This researcher also says this, and this one says that. So all of my research, everything I do with the play is all about proving that my point is true. So I'm not going to go in Act 1, he did this. In Act 2, he did this. In Act 3, that's too summary. I don't need to summarize the play. I need to prove that my point is true. So thinking about a thesis, thinking about the ultimate end goal of what your essay needs to do, it needs to be that kind of thesis, that kind of point that you're making. We have for this essay a topic list, and I want you to choose from those topics. The topic areas that are listed on that topic sheet are very broad. So you will probably find that you need to narrow it down under that heading. For example, one of the sections is revenge. Obviously, the play is all about revenge. So I need to be a little more specific than that. I can't just say, Hamlet is a revenge play. Well, no duh. No one's going to argue with that. So make a different point. So I might say, Hamlet's revenge really isn't ever complete. That's a really good point. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I need to prove it. So notice how I got more specific with that thesis. That's what you want to be thinking about as we read the play and go through it act by act. The next point on page 171 is use the text for evidence. You're going to need to use the play itself, quote from it, summarize passages from it to support what you're saying. So if I'm saying Hamlet's a spoiled brat, maybe one of my paragraphs is he's a spoiled brat in the way he behaves with his mother. So maybe I use part of what happens in Act 1, I think it's scene 2, where he's talking to his mom and to Claudius, and they're like, oh, please, Hamlet, don't be so sad anymore. The way he responds to her, maybe I could use that as an example of him being a spoiled brat. Later in Act 4, they have this enormous conversation in her bedroom where he's basically attacking her and saying, how dare you marry my father's brother? I could use that to help prove that he's a spoiled brat to his mom. So if I'm going to make the point, I have to show in the play where it's true. So I'm going to use the literature itself as a source. And then for your essay, you're required to use 4 other outside sources, so academic sources. Beyond that, you can use other sources too, but a minimum of 4 need to be academic, so from the databases. So the literature itself is a source, and then other sources to come help sort of back it up. The next point, present the literature in context. That's what this week's video is all about. So the video down below is all about historical context. When was this play written? What was going on in the world, especially in England? And how might we see that in the play itself? That gives you another layer of research that you can do. It actually makes it a little bit easier to write the play or to write the essay because you put the play in a piece of history. Well, now you can do historical research, not just research on the play itself. So there are a lot of different ways that helps to broaden the way that you write about the play. That's why I like to focus so much on the historical context of a piece of literature, because it completely shifts the way we research it, the way we talk about it, the way we write about it. So do spend some time with the video below that talks about Elizabethan England, what was going on during Shakespeare's life, and actually just before his life, because it was still kind of happening during the time that he was writing his plays. So please use that video below to help sort of start that conversation. Then next week, we'll look more specifically at Shakespeare himself, his biography, and how that might have affected Hamlet. Then we'll start reading the play itself. So literary analysis is a strong thesis that makes an argument, not a book report, not a summary. It is using the literature itself in the essay to prove what you're saying is true. So quoting from it, citing it, right? So all of that's going to happen. Using other sources to then come in and help support your point as well, so that whatever point or argument you're trying to make about the play is fully supported by the time you get to the end of the essay. So keep that in mind. If you know that that's what your end product needs to look like out in the future, so several weeks from now, start working now to build towards that. So then as we go through the play, we're going to go through it 1 act at a time. If something catches your eye and you're like, ooh, that would support my thesis, or that might support my topic, make a note of it. Jot it down somewhere, making sure that you keep track of where those little pieces are in the play that might help you in your essay. So start thinking now about possible topic that sounds interesting to you, so that as we go through the play act by act, you can start keeping track of those little passages or those little quotes that you're like, oh yeah, that needs to end up in my essay. All right, so we're going to start with the background this week and a little bit next week, and then we'll start reading the play itself. I look forward to seeing what topics you choose, and have a good week.